I think the market is still up in the air a bit as to who's going to manage all these agents. We know, I can give you a little sneak peek from our research. Yes, agents are on the roadmap for HR service delivery. We can tell you already there's a percentage being used, not as high as many people would think. By next year, that's going to triple based off of their plans for doing HR service delivery next year, I can tell you.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome everyone to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of it, what it means for our industry, and how it can impact our organization and your organization. We are recording today on August 27th, 2025. We are all back to school already, and we're bringing you all the news you can use this week. I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group. We are a research and advisory firm if you've never worked with us. And joining me today is my co-host and exemplary dresser in salmon, not pink today, Cliff, my Director of Research, Cliff Stevenson, and Principal Analyst. Cliff, welcome to the show today. Lots going on. We're going to try and get you out of here in time so you can get to your after event show. And also, but there's just so much going on. Lots and lots of tea today, right?
Yeah, a lot going on in the industry, a lot going on here at Sapient as well. We are in the late night, staying up late night stage of writing the big report that only gets bigger every year in a good way. We have so many new topics, so many new areas that we're looking at for user experience and vendor satisfaction, all because all of you took the time to take the survey and give us this wealth of information. We're going to package it up and find all these key interesting things, some of which are going to be backed up, little teaser for later, backed up by some of the stories we're seeing from less prestigious places like MIT, et cetera, et cetera.
Listen to you. I gotta love it. Yeah, we should know. I think last time we mentioned how big the survey was, what we were getting out of it. Just a reminder to everyone, if you are looking to get the earliest data possible on this research that we do every year, first off, you want to make sure you attend the HR Tech Conference in a few weeks, the week of September 16th. And actually, our session is that Thursday morning. So if you're planning your HR technology schedule and you're going to be in Las Vegas that week and you're trying to figure out your flights and you haven't already done that, make sure you stay through Thursday morning. Our session is 8 in the morning. And then we will do right after our session an Ask the Expert in the Expo Hall, where we will have, as we had mentioned last time, Tammy, our data analyst, and Cliff will be answering questions for you guys. And then after that, if you're interested in getting the data, keep following us. There will be some other opportunities. But as we have said before, the only place that you can get some of this information is in the live sessions with us, because there are some things we can only give with some context because we don't put it out in the report, because it's not fair to get it out in the report without context. So we're going to have fun, Cliff. I mean, what else are we doing at HR Tech? You're going to be speaking at the Advisor Collective as well, right? You'll be walking a little bit through what's going on and the research there, correct?
That's correct. We will, as you mentioned, we'll be doing Ask the Expert. We're also going to be doing some live recordings of this podcast, as well as others that are, through different partners, different groups that have asked us to be on. So we'll give you a full list of anywhere you can hear us, and we'll definitely be working a lot with other groups that are on the Work to Find podcast network that we're now a part of. We have our own, we're the official podcast partner for HR Tech this year. So there'll be a whole lot of people and a whole lot of all your favorite podcasters will be there, and we'll try and do as much collaboration as we can amongst all of the other reports. Of course, the big one will be your keynote on Thursday morning, so make sure to stay because that's just what it is. We wish we could do it some other time.
I know. We wish we could give it, and it is not up to us. If you need a different time, definitely talk to the HR Executive Magazine leadership team and let them know when you would like to have that session in the future. We will also be on Tuesday night. I'll be doing a session with Harbinger Group. We'll be talking about the changing HR buyer and HR technology and where it's heading. So that we're going to have a little bit of a preview of some of the data, and that will definitely be something you want to attend. It's about 20 minutes. It's on the expo hall. We'll also be running around. You'll watch for our pink cart. Cliff and I will be doing videos. We do what we call our awards give out for all of our top 5 and number 1 HR technology vendors who received the best rankings from you, the customers, out in the field. So that will be happening on Tuesday night as well. And then we should also note that Terry Zipper and myself will be doing a Women in HR Tech session. I'll be doing a panel on, I think it's Tuesday morning, with Johnson & Johnson, J&J, talking about assessments. I'm really excited about this. If you guys haven't had a chance to hear Christina speak before, she's amazing. We're going to be talking about the history of assessments, but more importantly, how do assessments impact things like recruiting and decisions about promotions inside your organization, especially in the day and age of AI, and with some of the conversation we had last week in the show, what that's going to mean. And then Terry Zipper will be closing out the Women in HR Tech with a panel with some really great CHROs and leaders talking about women in AI. So lots of stuff. You can catch us all over the AI event. If you are coming into town early and you want to join us for dinner, we're going to do a Monday night dinner. If you're staying until Thursday night, let us know. We might be doing a dinner at the Eiffel Tower, possibly. So some of our clients, people who are there and are interested in joining us. And there is a possibility, Cliff and I are talking about putting together a little group to go down to Fremont Street, I think, right?
Oh.
So, because I haven't had a chance to go see the old Las Vegas. If y'all are interested in going, drop us a DM. We have a couple of new people who have not been to HR Tech yet this year. Now, Cliff, you did warn me that if we're going to Fremont Street, HR kind of has to be off the table, right?
I would say it's an HR-free zone for all that might imply. It's definitely a little more casual. It's not as wild as perhaps you might think, but it's definitely not the stuffy confines of, your sort of normal meeting room, let's just say. You get a little more wild, but there's live music, there's bright lights. It definitely embodies the feel of what I think people think of as Vegas when they really get to it in a much more compact area. One thing that is always, for anyone that's listening to this, is going to HR Tech or is going to Vegas for the first time, there's some practical considerations. This is an enormous place. Vegas is extremely big because all the buildings are so large, everything looks closer. It's not. And it's very warm, especially outside. Things are very far away, even inside of the buildings. You're walking miles. So comfortable shoes are a must. But in Fremont, it's much more compact. So you can kind of have the entire experience without having to worry about stopping every 10 feet for water and rest. So
yes, yeah, exactly. And I know also I have been to some interesting spots with my HR friends and professionals. I did Amsterdam and I think the red light district out there. I'm trying to think, New Orleans. We did that whole area with HR friends. So, we've been in those situations. We know how to keep it professional, but, be aware of the environment we're in. But I think more importantly, we're going to be getting together for dinner that Thursday evening. So again, if anybody is around and wants to touch base, let us know. I know we have our spots for doing briefings are kind of at this point almost gone, Cliff. So if you can't reach us, maybe that's a good way to connect up with us is to do that. So, All right, Cliff, now we got to get into the tea because there's so much going on.
So much. A little behind the scenes. I was like, okay, no more stories. No one else can buy any more companies this week. It's potent.
Literally, Cliff was like, do not send me another big announcement.
Because there's some big ones that I think might have slipped containment and reached sort of everyday stories. This is huge. The biggest one probably is that Dayforce, previously Ceridian a few years ago, been Dayforce for some time now. They have been, the exact terms is they've entered in a definitive agreement with Thoma Bravo to become a private company. What this effectively means is that Thoma Bravo has spent $12.3 billion. I think that's a 25% increase over commonly held stock at that time. And if you had a stock worth, X amount of money, it would be 25% more, basically buying that increase in the valuation to purchase it outright. So that means that they will go from being publicly to privately held. Dayforce will. And we also got a little bit of extra details from the CEO, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
Stacey, that you kind of got a little bit of the insider info on?
Yeah. I mean, Eric Glass over there, who's head of marketing, and we've known David Ossip for many, many years, right? From the days that he joined Ceridian, took Dayforce, which was back then a small company, into Ceridian. And transformed a lot of what was old Ceridian customers into the Dayforce platform. It was one of the best transformations of old to new that I've seen in the market. And David Ossip, I think, his comments here is that, Thoma Bravo is widely recognized as a top investor in our industry. It's one of the largest private equity firms globally. They have invested in portfolios valued up to, he's very focused on sort of, this is a move to get to a point where they can invest more. That was the conversation we heard from both David Ossip and from Eric Glass, who is their head of marketing. And I actually do think that's quite true. I put a note out saying, we've seen both good and bad from private equity picking up these firms. I think there were many people who would say they're not sure that Lawson ended up where Lawson needed to end up with the Infor acquisition, right? Not exactly the same thing, but we know there have been other private equity firms who have picked up HR technology, kind of broke them apart and resold them off into things, right? Where I think this particular one is different is that if you look back at Thoma Bravo's sort of background, they've acquired a lot of CX applications and software. If you look at their portfolio page, they focus on software and technology. And I know, there was a lot of due diligence done on this. If you can just talk to the industry insiders. It was interesting. I had a couple conversations this week with financial investors. There was a couple of tears in the beers this week because they were like, oh, we're going to take one more public company off the board for HR tech, which just makes that whole market a little bit less. So, I think the hope is that they're going to invest, do something with them, and then put them back out again. That tends to be this model that we see go back and forth. We'll see. Or what we could be seeing from Thoma Bravo is that they're going to combine the great stuff that we see with Dayforce with some of the other stuff they've got at an enterprise level. And that will be really interesting because they've got other software packages, other AI technology. That might be really interesting as well. The one thing I think that we heard across the board on this conversation is that David Ossip has been very clear, and I will say that based off of what I know of their product, now we don't know everything, obviously, but what I know of their product is he has stayed to as much of a single line code as he possibly can. You remember back in the day, Workday had the one, code model. They've definitely moved away from that with all the acquisitions. We're going to have a few more that we're going to talk about today. UKG has gone, once they picked up Ultimate and Kronos together, they've done a lot of acquisitions to their model. Not that Dayforce has done some acquisitions, but most of them have been tuck-ins or it's been to get talent. Now that has caused them some issues where they had missing parts of what was a platform that people wanted. And I would have to say the last couple of years, we haven't seen a huge growth. I guess, they've had good growth numbers as HR technology goes, but we haven't heard a lot about them. They haven't been on a lot of RFPs, those kind of things. My sense is that this investment will allow them to spend a little more on marketing, spend a little bit more on awareness. They're really pushing at the enterprise level, I think. And that's where you're going to see them. And they do punch above their level on a lot of levels because they have one of the most complex time and scheduling tools in the market. So they are one of the few that can compete head on with UKG and what used to be Kronos's platform, the Dimensions platform, because they have the complexity of time and attendance at a level that a lot of other solutions don't. Their start was time and attendance and payroll. So they have a lot of that, and they've already got global payroll built in. So I think what we're going to see here is that this will give them a lot of runway to do more things, maybe invest more in customer care. When you're public-based companies, it's actually harder to invest in. It sounds kind of weird, but it's harder to invest in customer care because stocks do not generally go up or down based off of how good your customers rate you. They most of the time go up and down based off of how efficiently you're running. It's a lot more efficient to run if you cut all your customer care people, which is what happens in a lot of companies when they go public. They cut their customer care roles and their services divisions because they don't get valued the same way on service money as they do on ARR or revenue that is repeatable every year. And so I'm excited to see this for the team there. David Ossip put a nice team. A lot of ex-Workday people have gone over to head up that product. And so I think we're going to see them really, really become a challenge in the market. I don't think this got as much press as some of the other news that came out this week. And I think this one is going to be the one that's going to actually cause people a little bit more of a challenge when it comes to sales, at least in the next 12 months it will. So.
Yeah, and it also reminds me, one we talked about 2 weeks ago, or the last time we met, was the NeoGov acquisition. That was also done by a group that doesn't traditionally been in the HR tech space. They've been HR adjacent. And this seems to be the same sort of thing. So that's pretty interesting. People are finding value here. As we mentioned before, despite the somewhat rockiness of the economy in general, at least in the US, HR tech remains somewhat of a bedrock, to keep using the same sort of terminology. And speaking of those big news stories, we've got Workday signing a definitive agreement, there's that term again, to acquire Paradox, which is a talent acquisition, AI-based talent acquisition company, one of the very first that really sort of cut their teeth on doing AI and candidate experience, and probably the most well known for that. And now Workday has sort of more or less proven the fact that they were probably maybe the best in the business of that by going ahead to agree to acquire them. I believe that this is another one of those cases where we don't have the exact numbers on it like we did. I don't know if we mentioned it. I also want to do a quick correction. I said 25% increase on stock price. It was 32% increase. And that total sale was 12.3 billion in that Thoma Bravo for Dayforce. Something we give the exact numbers. Don't have the exact numbers for Paradox, but it is interesting because we have now called this out, I think, for the last month, the last two episodes, that candidate experience, talent acquisition, that whole world seems to be where we believe it looks like companies are staking a long-term belief in. They do think that when this whole AI thing shakes out, we're going to talk about some predictions down the road in this episode. They believe that there's still a lot of value in using embedded AI tools within the realm of talent acquisition and all of that encompasses. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, you know Paradox a little bit better than I do. You do a lot more in the recruiting space. But when we look at our data, what I found interesting here is that we had only a few Paradox comments and user experience vendor sat ratings, but they were very high. So it was very highly rated by the customers who had assessed it on our survey this year. Workday has struggled a bit with recruiting, right? I think they've gotten much better. They're getting much higher rankings there than they have in the past from users, and they've fixed a lot of solutions. But one of the things we know they struggled with most was this frontline, large workforce, high turnover type of business models, right? Doing bulk hiring basically is what it was called in many cases. And Paradox is one of the best at this. And I would agree. I think people are doubling down that this is where AI will have some of the biggest impact. We know that from our data. And
yeah.
And the screen just changed in front of me. I was like, wait a minute, where did my screen get? Yeah, you gotta have everything up where it needs to be. It's at the end of the day, the sun's coming in, it's changing up my screens. But what I really think is interesting here is, given where Workday's at right now, and they even mentioned in their notes that, from AI-driven talent discovery and matching with HiredScore to AI-powered candidate conversations with Paradox, and they gave a number. I want to say it's something like 186,000. Did I get that right? There was some crazy 189 million AI-assisted candidate conversations through Paradox, right? That's massive. But we also know that Workday's in a bit of a crux right now with the Mobley lawsuit, and that is very much about sort of AI invested in decision making. So I think it'll be interesting to watch how Workday handles this to kind of manage that acquisition and those hires through the time at which they're going to be dealing with this lawsuit. But I do think that they're not stopping. They're saying, yes, we may have some challenges. We are going to double down, and we're going to make sure AI is being used effectively inside the HR function. And I don't think there's an agree or disagree on this one. I just think this is a market where some people are playing a very long game, like you said, and they are definitely feeling like they need to get ahead of it. And one way to do that is to get the talent. I do think this is very much not just a solution hire, but a talent hire. I think it was a very big part of HiredScore as well. You need AI developers, and they have been in the recruiting space. That's where they're at. That's where most of them are at, and they've gone through the tough times. And when we get into some of the new hires for them, you're going to see why they want AI hires, right?
Yeah. I do think it does show, though, this something we've been talking about for the last year, 2 years, which is the idea of like, where do you find the most value in AI? And it's obviously that low risk, and also it's solving a problem. This is a real problem. Long before AI came around, one of the biggest complaints of anyone, and that means everyone that's listening to this, both of us, have at least at one point tried to get a job. And almost everyone agrees that it's a bit of a nightmare, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, it filled out this form and it was very impersonal. I never heard back, or I didn't go this. I must have felt the same thing. Everyone's got a horror story, and it's usually every single job you apply for. So this idea of mass personalization is something that AI can and has done before, right? So it's really on the end user side of saying, this is tailored to me in language and in ways that make sense to me, and I'm able to get sort of feedback and have a conversational approach. Yeah. So it is fixing a known problem, and it's not making any decisions. It's just more of literally candidate experience, does what it says on the tin. So I think there's a lot of value in that, but you're right. That ability to sort of get the right people to create the right products in ways that aren't risky, as you just said, they know about risk. So
Yes.
I think they're looking at that. And I think that that's definitely the case for the next acquisition it's hard to believe.
Workday was doing back to backs. I wrote one note and I was like, Cliff, you're gonna have to write the other. I can't do anymore.
So Workday acquired Flowise, which is an AI agent builder. It's a low code one, meaning I know you're a little more of the expert on this, Stacey, but I believe that just means what it says, which is you don't need to do a lot of heavy coding. It's a lot of easier to do, not no code. That's another thing, that's
not vibe coding either, right? Like it's like vibe coding, no code. Those are two different. This is low code, different code.
You got to do a little bit of work, think about like sort of like if you worked with Linux or something, you're going to need to know a little bit of the language. And it's clearly, I like some of the metrics they point out, 42,000 GitHub stars. That's more or less an upvote amongst people that are actually using it on GitHub, which is a repository of coding and projects and things of that nature. So it does show that this is a sort of AI users AI program, if you want to think about it like that, right? This is the stuff that I'm going to say this term with all endearment because this is what the nerds are using. So this is what you want to get at. So I think it's pretty interesting. And it's an AI agent builder, meaning that they're not just going to say, okay, here's what you have, but here's now the ability to create and deploy agents that you need for your specific use. Again, that mass personalization, right? That's what it seems to me. Yeah.
And you'll remember that Workday was one of the first to come out of the gate. I want to say this was it last summer, maybe? I remember I was at the Natural Museum with Bella when it came out with the announcement, because I literally had to like step out and take a call in the hallway because they were doing this announcement. So it must have been when I was visiting Bella, so maybe it was early this year or last fall. But they came out with the announcement that they were going to do the agent of record. They were going to basically own that. They were going to basically give you the tools to manage all of your agents. And that was a big conversation. David Summers at the time, that was his big push. And I remember that was a big push at the analyst session this spring. And so I think they're still, I think, working on that. That's still sort of in the works as to what that's going to look like still. I think this will add to that conversation, right? Because I think the market is still up in the air a bit as to who's going to manage all these agents. We know, I can give you a little sneak peek from our research. Yes, agents are on the roadmap for HR service delivery. We can tell you already there's a percentage being used, not as high as many people would think. By next year, that's going to triple based off of their plans for doing HR service delivery next year, I can tell you. So come to our session, you'll get a chance to understand what that looks like. But agents are going to be an important part of this. Agents, if for those who don't understand, the difference is that an AI intelligence advisor gives you sort of information to help you make decisions. AI chatbots do a lot of nudges and help you walk through things. AI agents actually do the work for you. And it is not a type of technology. It's usually a mix of technology. It's usually a mix of traditional AI algorithms and traditional sort of flowchart kind of AI tools, as well as the LLM tools. Those agents are generally making decisions. So you got to be very careful, because to do the job, they might go in and actually run all of your onboarding and connect all the different systems and build out maybe an employee profile and move that into the right system, where that used to be manual work for a lot of people. That's what we're looking for agents to do. So it's a big part of where the market's heading. I think this is a good purchase by Workday. I think the question was, were they not already building something like this internally? I think that's an interesting conversation to have. But I do think this is an important piece to have. You have to have this in the market, right?
Yep, absolutely. And the Workday stories don't stop. Not an acquisition this time, though. Yeah. This time we've just got a strategic partnership, Workday and Daily Pay. Daily Pay, I believe we've talked about on this before, but probably you can tell from the name, they're earned wage access, on-demand pay, however you like to think of it as, get your paycheck as you go company. Now, they've been together since 2023, Workday and Daily Pay. So this is sort of strengthening the bond, creating a sort of more, contractual relationship, or, as they say, a strategic partnership, but basically allowing a great expansion to most of all of Day's customers to have access to on-demand pay. That's something that we've watched quite a bit through our data. When we talk about, for instance, one of the stories that we've seen has been the adoption of AI, and people are like, what are the true amount of people that are using this? Well, the one that I think that was surprising in that same vein a few years ago was when we looked at how many people are actually using on-demand pay, and specifically who. And we saw much more people using it in that are full-time workers, right? Not the kind of people who probably needed it because there just wasn't enough reach, there weren't the right tools, there wasn't enough expansion, et cetera, et cetera. And this looks to sort of amend that issue, get it to the people who most need it.
Yeah, the daily pay, I think, it is the language here. If you want to look at a strategic partner, that means that Workday will bring them probably to the table when they're having conversations with organizations where previously they would have just been in their marketplace. They've been doing on-demand pay for a while. They'll probably do some more integration so that the integrations will map a lot more carefully, right? Probably work with partners on this from an integration perspective as well. I think the one thing to note on this conversation about daily pay is that this mirrors actually quite well the acquisition with Paradox, to be honest, being very timely. These are kind of connected because this is focusing on that frontline worker and that hourly workforce. And we do have to remember, as much as we think about Workday oftentimes as sort of, they have a lot of office workers, they have the big consulting firms and stuff too. They are, they at this point, I believe, and my numbers might be off a little bit now, but I like 75% of the Fortune 1000, I think. I could be wrong on that, but it's somewhere in that range, right? And when you talk about that, that's a lot of retail. That's a lot of Walmarts and big guys, right? And so this is a needed thing at that retail level, at that hospitality level. And so I think it just gives them some added tools to really address the needs of those organizations. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, we've got another partnership coming up. PayScale is partnered with Korn Ferry. So that's pretty interesting. Korn Ferry, I believe, for the first time has shown up in our data set. We have, and I don't even know if we mentioned this, we were talking about all these different areas we went to. We've had skills management in before, but we haven't been able to get enough of a data set to have it at the granular level, right? All different sizes and all the different sort of ways it's in there. And so now that we see that reflected by having Korn Ferry there. It's long been around as a consulting firm that's worked definitely in the skills management space and executive pay and leadership and that sort of thing. So this sort of partnership brings together, PayScale's technology with Korn Ferry's, I would say, massive data set, right? They have quite a bit of executive compensation data, pay and benchmarks. And so it's a win-win, right? They get access to that data, PayScale does, and Korn Ferry now has the ability to give their customers access to something beyond what they would have had before, which would just been like, what they could find online, right? Or just sort of a more static set. Now they can sort of use all of this together and create the sort of parameters to give them the specific compensation information they need.
Yeah, and I think they needed this. PayScale's got a large data set on compensation, but we also know that their major competitor in this space outside of the big consulting firms like a Mercer, but would be someone like Salary.com, who we just got a big briefing with last week. And Salary.com is definitely investing heavily in taking their very large data set and leveraging AI in a way that will make it more accessible to not just users at the compensation level, but users throughout the organization, like talent acquisition or even your hiring or your leadership roles. I think you're going to see both PayScale and Salary.com continue this sort of desire to sort of really leverage the data sets they've got, because we know from our research and our perspective that compensation is the one sort of conversation that happens in the organization at the board level all the way down to the individual employee level. Everyone has a compensation conversation, and the data that's there really has good, accurate information. These companies are great at getting data. So the more they can kind of connect these dots, the better for this market. Right?
Yeah. And speaking of leadership, we've got lots of actual fun people moves.
Yeah.
All of you, we love you all. I don't want to go like whip through it. We just have a lot. So we apologize. I know that, last couple of times we've had people like Jason Sava and Amberly Dressler that we knew very well. We'd love to know all of you that we mentioned. We don't know you. Please reach out if you hear your name mentioned, and we'll give you some more. We'll talk more about you. Dara Brenner started as the CEO at Employ. Dara, I might have met you before either of us probably met you, because she's worked at Ultimate and then UKG as the VP of HCM Product Management, previously at Equifax as well, also as VP of Product Management. So this is someone who stayed very focused on product, and now will be CEO at Employ, who has a wide range of different companies underneath that realm. Very exciting. I do like to see that sort of product management experience going in to a CEO.
Yeah, that will be a good one. And employees, I think, needs this right now. I mean, they brought Lever, Jazz HR, and
Job bite.
JobBite, right? Yeah, all together under the employee brand, and they sell individually. They end up in our survey individually. I think it'd be good to get, I think, a CEO there who they've been. I think it was a strong vision to pull them together. Now I think the conversation is, especially with what we're seeing happen in the market with some of these organizations like Paradox and Smart Recruiter last week with SAP. This is a space that's going to continually change, and you're going to need to have some strong leadership moving into it, right? Similarly, I mean, that we're right down the line with iCIMS, right, Cliff?
That's right. iCIMS joins a few of the very few companies, but have a chief AI officer. Something we didn't even know about. That was a title a couple years ago, and now we're seeing it more and more. So Daniel Joplin will be the new chief AI officer at iCIMS. Speaking of talent acquisition, iCIMS is pretty much the most well-known, especially in the enterprise space, and again, show up in our report every year for user experience and vendor satisfaction. And, I think this signals that they are looking towards the future and not just sort of sitting on their laurels, right? They're going to embrace this world of AI, especially for talent acquisition, for all the reasons we just talked about.
And I think it's worth noting that Daniel's background comes from the world of data science. He was a director of data science at MasterCard and director of AI at Sword Health. So I kind of like that twist on it, which is a little bit different than just tech, right? So there's that twist I think we should all be pointing out. Yeah.
That's true. And then not to put any bad spin on anyone that came out of tech, because UKG just appointed Jim Chowdhury as their CTO, their chief technology officer, joining, let's say, a robust list of people who've come from the FANG companies, especially, and including Microsoft as well, right? So this is your Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, and I'd probably add Adobe into that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is Jim Chowdhury's experience, Amazon and Salesforce, and joining UKG as they continue to make investments within their technology, something they've done since the Ultimate days, really.
Yeah. And Cliff's being really nice because I basically, when I sent this off and a couple others, I said, Cliff, the HR world's being eaten by Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Adobe right now. Y'all can laugh at me. I love all that. I mean, I think it's good to get some consumer grade thinking in the HR space. So I love that. I'm going to do a shout out to all of the new product AI techs who are coming in. Please be aware HR is different from consumer. And I think that's the one thing that I will just give a warning on to this market is that we've seen a lot of consumer grade leaders come into our space and leave really quickly because they didn't take the time to get to know the nuances of HR from both a strategic perspective, a compliance perspective, or regionality differences. Because consumer grade, you can do kind of the same thing across the board. You have to have differences for individual profiles, but generally you're kind of building something that meets a big consumer need. HR is a little bit different. And so I'll just put a warning shot out there for all of our new friends. We all want to get to know you. We are excited to see what you're going to do in this market. Just remember, HR is a special cookie sometimes. So
it's really well said. And I think it does signify something that we talked about at the beginning of this episode, which is clearly HR tech is seen as the future, or it's certainly not a step down. It's not hidden in the shadows anymore. This is just a natural stepping stone. It's funny to go from that to Google and vice versa. We've seen some of that. Now, the exact opposite, or I would say more traditional, is Jeff Carr joining as president for Atana. So Jeff, if you look at Jeff's background, it's like the who's who of HR tech, right? PeopleSoft, Saba, CEO at PeopleFluent, COO at Zenefits, CEO at Inkling, even Docebo. Shout out to the wonderful learning platform. So that is really interesting because he took the different aspect. He's like, no, industry veteran right here.
Yeah, I've known Jeff Carr since Saba days, I can remember, right? So that goes back ways. Ages me, not Jeff, just me. But yeah, I'm excited to see him step into another new role. I think it's interesting he's going back to learning L&D because I think he's had a strong experience in that space. And so, learning is changing dramatically here, right? And so I think we are going to definitely see a lot of step ups on rethinking the learning platforms. We can definitely see that in our data already. I think you're going to need some new thinking here, and I'm excited to see what Jeff Carr brings to it. Yeah,
exactly. And because we haven't mentioned Workday enough, I swear This is not a Workday podcast.
No.
They've inserted themselves in the conversation. Of course, we love all of our friends, but here we've got some stories in this area too, because we've got Gabe Monroy joining Workday as SVP GM of the Workday platform. So another one that, coming in, I don't know Gabe as well. That's another one where I'll say, please reach out. Love to know more about you. But yeah, Workday investing not just in other companies and other technologies, but also in people. So definitely, we're going to have to keep an eye on this Workday company, huh, Stacey?
We might, right? Yeah. Yeah, and Gabe's got a strong background from Google and Microsoft, right? And a lot of open source. So he's, I think, again, we're going to see that consumer conversation being brought into the market at multiple levels. And so, but I do think that, Workday has gone through a couple of leadership changes, but the platform is a big, important play for them. To me, this is one of the most important things they're dealing with right now, because that whole software as a service platform model, extendability of the Workday platform, it's important to the partners, which is a big play for them. It's important to large enterprise companies, which is who a lot of their customers are, who want to tailor. We get the word configuration all the time in our survey, but one of the number one things we see over and over again that people are frustrated with is because we went from systems that you could basically customize out the crazy, which made it impossible to update and upgrade, which is where we were at with PeopleSofts and on-premise solutions, to today, cloud is wonderful, but there's just enough nuance sometimes that it doesn't work the way you want to. When you've got a platform that you can extend out, that gives you that ability to do both a mix of configuration and customization, right?
Yep. And hang on, but wait, there's more. We also have Aled Blanket starting as VP of AI engineering at Workday. So again, more in the AI. Did especially like the LinkedIn announcement because they immediately just said, "Hey, we're hiring." So,
Yeah.
if you're looking for a job, especially in the management, look for Aled Blanket. And they said they're ready to go and want to start hiring. So, a lot of energy. Love to see it. Certainly for all of the concern about AI possibly causing some job loss, that does seem to be the case here.
No. Yeah, they're definitely going to be hiring more. It sounds like I have to do a shout out here on this because now, Alec comes from Google engineering as well as AWS, Amazon services, but more importantly, she is a female in the AI space. I know I shouldn't have to call that out these days, but it is good to see. We are doing a lot of hires in this market right now. I love seeing more female leadership, and I just wanted to shout that out just a little bit because hopefully we'll get a chance to meet Alec in person here soon at upcoming events. But I love to continue to see women lead in this space, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And then we have a little bit of, I don't know, celebratory, but remembrance, still alive. But Chano Fernandez is stepping down as CEO at Eightfold. So Eightfold is one that you've been very involved with, Stacey. I've known as an analyst for quite some time. One of the very first AI companies. They're definitely the first I can remember in HR tech space to use the .ai suffix that has become quite all the rage for AI standalone applications. But Chano Fernandez is going to be stepping back as CEO after a fairly long tenure there. So
yeah, not that long actually. Yeah, so people might remember that Chano 2 years ago now, right? Chano was actually co-president, I want to say. I could be wrong on that. Over at Workday, he was kind of next in line to be, and he'd left from there, came over to Eightfold when they had brought in some new talent over at Workday. I think, part of what we were seeing in a lot of the mix is that a lot of the US-based organizations were looking for leadership and leadership that had strong global capabilities. And Chano definitely brings that in a lot of different forms. And I think, Workday was heading in a different direction. I thought what I'm wondering on the front here with Eightfold is we're seeing a lot of acquisitions right now of the recruiting platforms. Eightfold fits into that fold of what would be considered talent intelligence. It may be that with this change, either Chano's found something new that fits his background a little bit better, that he's more interested in. We'll see. He didn't really say, but it also might be that there were some expectations about what was going to happen with Eightfold, and maybe some of those doors have closed with acquisitions being done. I don't know. This is completely, speculation at this point. But I do think it's important to, when we think about sort of leadership of these companies, you may be like, well, do I really need to know who's the president, who's the CEO, who's not? Does it matter to me as a practitioner? Does it matter to me as an industry investor, as an industry follower? I think some sense, yes, right? These companies keep doing what they're going to do. It matters in the sense of what kind, I think, of next steps they're going to make. And I think as a practitioner, you really do have to understand the financial makeup of the companies you buy into and the connected opportunities they have where they might get acquired. This gets back to our platform cluster conversation, Cliff, right?
Yes.
Knowing who they're partnering with, knowing what those relationships are really important when you're making those buying decisions. And that's, the same thing with Eightfold. So I'm interested in seeing, we have a couple of good friends over at Eightfold. We need to get some answers as to where they're heading with it. It may even be out. I just hadn't seen yet, but we do want to sort of get some follow up with them on where the direction is that they're heading. Right.
Yeah. I almost stuck the Chano's tenure by because I was like, maybe we can go one without mentioning Workday, but no,
Yeah.
you
All right.
guys on it. It's all good.
It is the day, right?
We were talking to members of our cohort that we do here at Sapient Insights Group, or I should say the last one we did, doing another one. And that was actually of strong interest to them as many of them are in the process of buying or thinking of purchasing tech, and they want to know the full picture, everything that they can know before making a decision. It could greatly impact, of course, their people and their company. So anything that's going to give them insight as to not just the current state, but the future state is of high interest. So yeah, when you're in those sort of buying decisions of multi-million-dollar platforms, you're absolutely going, give me all the info I can get.
It's important when you're making those decisions. Yeah, very much so.
So speaking of, we've sort of alluded to this. There was a study that came out from Goldman Sachs about how AI will affect the global workforce. And I would say, depending on your view, depending on whether you're an investor in AI or not, this is probably pretty good news. One of the big headlines was that AI adoption was not expected to have much of an impact, and even then it would be only temporary. Stacey mentions multiple times this will more be title switching or sort of job duty switching and that sort of stuff. And that seems to be the case. And our own data, spoiler alert, sort of backs that up. We are seeing effects in hiring, but they are industry specific for, we talk about what are the use cases of AI and where can people go. So I think they estimated there would be 2.5% of current specifically U.S. employment could be at risk. But it is, again, there are other ones like computer programmers, strangely accountants and auditors. I thought those would be safe because there's just too much risk, doing that term again. Legal assistants, and customer service, right? Because that's definitely where you can see some chatbots and, where there's an area that's a little more ripe for disruption. So pretty interesting. I want to sort of juxtapose that with an MIT study that I think is another one that sort of broke containment and got out into the general public. And most of you might have seen this one, that this sort of pairs with a few other AI-centric stories. MIT study found that 95% of organizations are getting zero return from generative AI. In the same week, or maybe it was the week before, Sam Altman, head of OpenAI, said that it is a bit of a bubble. AI, he doesn't believe it's bursting, of course. At the same time, along all of this, we saw the Anthropic raising more money. That's the Claude company, up to 10 billion. OpenAI hit 1 billion revenue in just July. So, estimated, over 5 billion in revenue in 2025. So, it's interesting. There's two different sort of stories. I think with AI, because, let's just admit it's a hot button issue. There's been some just incredibly devastating and sad stories that have come out on a personal level just this week as we're recording, as we said, at the end of August. And it seems to be that people are like falling into two camps, like AI is just useless and should be burned, or, it's the savior of humanity. When, of course, like any technology, it's more about let's just see where it lands. I think we went through a much smaller version of this with things like blockchain and with virtual reality, whatever you want to call it. And what it eventually settles into, what are the use cases, right? And that's what we're trying to do with our data. We go, not just are you using it, but what are you using it for? And how, are you using which tools specifically? And what do you like? What do you dislike about them? So we'll be revealing a lot of that. But I'll tell you that, my thoughts on it, being that some of this isn't too surprising, especially when following the show, that we look at the financials and we know that the underlying costs. But we also see that this whole episode has been about people investing large sums of money in AI, and they would not be doing that if they thought it was just a complete house of cards. That's my thought. I don't know, Stacey. You also we've had lots of discussions on this even on our own time. We
do, yeah, and our data is not far off from this, right? Like I think we're one of the few that's very grounded in where the market's at, right? I always tell people I'm like, all innovations have a space and time, and you've got to kind of space kind of how you're working with them. What I two things on these particular things. I think one, when you really look at like Goldman Sachs, how they're looking at what they are looking at is they're looking at businesses from an investment perspective, public and even private, right? Is there money to be made off of this from a stock market perspective, right? And they are watching where they might lose employees because that might have an impact on stock market price, right? So you kind of have to think also too where the conversations are coming from. The MIT study was a interview of roundtables of executives. It was not sort of a formal study, right? But again, I think they both validate a bit of what our data is showing, right? Which is that we're not seeing large layoffs, we're not seeing, big adoption numbers. But what we are seeing is very, very strategic and tactical uses, and the idea that people want to prep to get ready for what's coming next. And I think that's the pace where everyone should be at, right? So
that's a well said. And speaking of sort of getting ready for what's coming next, we get a little bit of news from China. Due to the nature of their government, they're able to put regulations in place much faster. So they're usually a good sort of bellwether for how we're going to do this, along with the EU, who also is able sometimes to move a little quicker. But one of the things that they're already putting in, this is laws that's already been passed, is basically about labeling AI, right? Which is a big one that we're sort of struggling with here in the US, is a little bit of concern over, is this real? Is what I'm seeing, this image generated? Now, in the metadata meaning, you sort of look behind it, you look at the source for this stuff. It has to mention whether it was AI generated, and that's true for audio and video and any of that type of stuff, along with who was the creator, the provider, and a reference number. And then also in the EULA, right, the end user license agreements, there has to be an explanation while labeling. I think that's to me, seems simple and a nice sort of conservative first step. I don't think many people would complain about this, of just saying, I just want to know if this is AI and you have to tell us if it is. Like warning labels on food. That seems like something that people will probably go ahead and adopt the rest of the worldwide, if I had to guess.
Yeah. I think this is on par with where we're going to see. Nobody's moving real fast on these, but it's good to see. It would say even China, right? Like China is putting regulations in place, in a market where I think that they can lock down a lot easier than we can. It's harder here in the U.S., but the states are definitely doing it, right?
And then speaking of the states, we got a report out of the Department of Labor called America's Talent Strategy, Building the Workforce for the Golden Age, which was mostly a list of recommendations and sort of roadmap of some thoughts. But one of the things that was pretty interesting, that there was some areas where there's some specifics actually had to do with HR tech. So one of the things that is mentioned is the states will be encouraged to build unified online portals, create locations where people can access multiple services in one place, and online training resources available along with career services and workforce system. So basically what this signifies is that there's just a general thought that we need to have unified systems, and that these sort of disparate systems, even though maybe they do work, it doesn't feel like they do, and people's experience with those systems often defines whether they are valuable. You mentioned, Stacey, that unfortunately, user experience isn't often thought of over ARR, and that's the case even at the government level. But it does mean that they're almost sort of buying into this, not buying into, because that makes it sound like it's like a pyramid scheme or something, but they're also in agreement with this whole idea of the cluster model, right? Let's have systems that are all in lockstep and there's no waste. So that's pretty interesting, that one of the things they literally highlighted amongst, this whole idea of revamped workforce is that we need a single unified system as a major indicator of whether this will be successful.
Yeah. Could we be getting a full LMS? We'll see, right? I don't know. Our friends, I'm sure in the learning space will be vying for where all this is heading, right?
Absolutely. And I'll be vying for hearing more. Do we have anything else? If that not enough?
Yeah, we've got to wrap up because I know you have plans this evening. But let us real quickly. A couple places you're going to see us. I'll be at ADP Innovation Day next week in New York. So if you're going to be in the New York area, let me know. I will be there September 3rd. We have already talked about our HR Tech. I think by the time we do our next show, it'll be right before HR Tech. So we'll do a couple of sneak peeks because by the time it will come out, it will be after HR Tech. We also will be we possibly built the SAP event. We're still having conversations. I might also be at the Equifax event. So we're talking about doing those events in early October. I'll be at the Dayforce event on the 7th and 8th at Wynn. Cliff, you'll be at Oracle Cloud World October 12th and 13th. We'll both be at UKG Aspire November 3rd through 6th. I'll be doing the next iSolved regional keynote events in Philadelphia and Scottsdale those weeks as well. And then we are also possibly going to be at the Unit 4 analyst event November 12th, 13th. We'll be doing a big event at our CFO Council in New York that we'll be running roundtables at for the Financial Technology Expo November 13th and 14th. And then I will be heading out to the following week to Workday's MIA event, which will be their Rising, which will be really important because we're not going to get to go to it because it's the same week as HR Tech here. So we're going to miss some of those announcements. We'll get them at that MIA event. And I'm sure there will be more, Cliff, but that gets us through November, right?
Something's got to go through.
And
I'm really looking forward to it. It's, you kind of get, let's be honest, a little burned out sometimes doing a lot of these. But now that I've had a couple, a few weeks off, I know you haven't been as lucky, and we've got all this new data. I'm sort of turning the corner now. It's like, okay, now it's time to go share all this cool stuff.
I know we got so much to share, right? And it's hard because you can't give the little bit of it. You gotta get it in a press. Like I know I was like, well, why don't you just send something out? And I'm like, but without the context, it's really hard because you got to know like who said this and why do they say that. So we're excited about it, yes, and we're gonna definitely get out there and be talking about it. Cliff and I both. All right, as we wrap today, a couple of big pushes. One thing that will be something new this year, you will be able to, because we're working on it right now, actually purchase the payroll, the HRMS, and the possibly, cross our fingers, emerging tech segments the week of the HR Technology Conference when we launch the big award winners for the user experience and vendor stat ratings. So just be aware of that. That's something you can buy. I think there will be a deal if you buy those reports and then you want to buy the full report in October when it comes out. There'll be some discounts applied to that. So that's something to just be aware of. Also, if you want to know more about what we're doing and where we're going to be at and how to get this news and information, or want to make sure you get notified the minute that these white paper is full or the research report is fully out, go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. We also will have a new website in about 2 weeks, maybe the 10th, I think is when it's going to go live. So let us know what you think of that. We're excited about that. And then be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper. And if you like these Huddle events and episodes, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to, I'm like, my brain we're getting there.
So we're on YouTube, I should mention as well.
I know. And to our podcast. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I would definitely recommend doing that right now because we're going to have lots of comments on HR tech in the coming weeks. Thank you to our production team, Brand Method Media Group, who also helps produce our podcast run by amazing founder Kelly, our marketing team, Summer Alano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway. We've got a lot of other people touching things right now. Katie and Kendall are now involved in that. We'll have to get all them on the list. Thanks to our listeners and our community. We couldn't do this without you. We'd love to hear feedback from the session. So please let us know if you're a listener, especially when we're at HR Tech. If you come up and talk to us at HR Tech that you're a listener, we love that. But please do that. We really appreciate it. That's it for the episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. So everyone have a good week. Bye, everyone.